may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, my dudes, we are going to be back at it. Instead of looking at the bad picks from this past draft, we are going to be focusing in on the players that I think were massive values. I'm going to be comparing it to where I have them in my own 2021 rankings with where they went in this draft, as well as trying to show what the high stakes redraft players are doing with the ADP over there, and just kind of reference everything and talk about where I think the correct picks were, where I think we actually missed out on some value possibly. But of course, please, y'all know that the board is going to be on the screen. Let me know who you think was a great value that I possibly missed out on talking with, because I'm going to be talking about 5 players here. And of course, there were way more than just 5 value picks. So if you see something that you think stands out, leave a comment, but just not a player's name. I mean, go a little bit deeper than that. Try to help some other people out that are watching this video. Leave an explanation on why you think they are a good value as well. And of course, go down there, drop that like. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. I have no idea why, but we are going to continue to produce high quality content, and I cannot wait for a couple more weeks when we have our official 2021 draft guide out over there on Patreon, and we are in the new studio that we have gotten because of everybody supporting the show on Patreon. But anyway, that should be it. Let's dive into this draft real quick. And the first player we are going to be talking about is going to be AJ Dillon. Okay, so AJ Dillon, a player that we were targeting in the 10th round, right? Let me run down this scenario for you. Okay, so we draft Hollywood Brown in the 9th. I mean, I don't want to call it a panic pick, but time was coming down. We were trying to figure out where we were going to go. Hollywood Brown was at the very top of ADP, and then AJ Dillon was about a round behind on ADP, and I think we slightly preferred AJ Dillon, where I got greedy and I went, you know what? Let's take Hollywood here. We can probably get AJ Dillon in the 10th. Let's do that. So we take Hollywood Brown instead. Then I go to pull up the YouTube chat, and everybody is just spamming draft AJ Dillon, draft AJ Dillon, draft AJ Dillon. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay, it looks like we probably made the wrong decision here. It looks like he's probably not coming back to us. And then SPAC comes out with a donation and says, man, you need to take AJ Dillon with this next pick. And of course, AJ Dillon comes off the board in the next 30 seconds. I mean, that's what you get with live streaming a draft. Unsure if he would have fell regardless, but that is the story behind this selection. Going as the running back 35 in this draft, and surprisingly, high stakes redraft players are actually drafting him a little bit lower than this. They're drafting him as the running back 38, which I was extremely surprised to see, because if you're going over to Patreon and seeing my 2021 rankings that are going to be released in 2 weeks, you're going to see that AJ Dillon is our running back 30 this upcoming season. I think he is a fantastic value. And with AJ Dillon, I mean, we are talking about a running back that does have league-breaking upside. That's what you want to be identifying in this range. If we look at where he is going around, I mean, you have Tyler Higbee, Melvin Gordon, Terrace Marshall, all going directly after him. You have Paris Campbell, Dallas Goedert, Tony Pollard, all going directly before him. And I think Tony Pollard is a great example of a player we can compare to AJ Dillon right now. Because in the case of Tony Pollard, we can all agree that that is a running back. If an Ezekiel Elliott injury occurs, then all of a sudden, Tony Pollard is most likely going to be a high-end running back 2, low-end running back 1 in fantasy, as he's going to be the feature down running back in Dallas, a very productive offense, and we know Dallas has a good offensive line. So there are so many things there for Tony Pollard. But at the same time, I think very few people would make the argument that Tony Pollard actually has any kind of upside to be a weekly start without an Ezekiel Elliott injury. Now, I understand that Tony Pollard can still be a great pick in fantasy drafts just as a pure handcuff, a pure just upside play in the case of a Zeke suspension, a Zeke injury, or anything of the sort. But AJ Dillon, I would argue, is everything we just said about Tony Pollard and more. Because we know with what we have seen with the usage of Aaron Jones in Green Bay over the past few years, that Aaron Jones, while he is an elite option in fantasy because he gets all the usage in the receiving game as well as the usage at the goal line, we've seen the Green Bay Packers still want to use Jamal Williams in a role on a down-to-down basis, especially between the 20-yard lines on early downs, and they're going to be splitting that backfield. And it's not even like it's a 80-20 split. It's more like it's a 65-35 split. And in the case of Jamal Williams, while yes, you could have gotten away with starting him in fantasy, you wouldn't necessarily be excited about doing that any given week. It didn't matter what the scenario was. I mean, if Aaron Jones was injured, of course, you're looking at Jamal Williams as a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2 based on the offensive line for Green Bay. And also, we just know that that's going to be one of the most productive offenses in the NFL with Aaron Rodgers. Well, now with A.J. Dillon, you are getting all of that. I would make the argument that Dillon is a much better running back as well, and I think you see that with the Green Bay Packers deciding to invest a late second-round pick into him last year. I mean, he goes very close to both J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers in last year's NFL draft class, but the difference between A.J. Dillon and a running back going ahead of him in 90% of drafts right now is A.J. Dillon, I think, has the upside to be able to be started in games where Aaron Jones is even healthy. Because we know Aaron Jones is a running back that's not going to see every touch in his offense. And at the same time, A.J. Dillon is massive. He is literally the same weight of Derrick Henry with 3 inches shorter. So that tells us that he has a drastically higher BMI. He was the same speed at the NFL Combine as well. And I'm not sitting here saying that A.J. Dillon's as good as Derrick Henry. Of course I'm not saying that. Whenever we make a comparison like that, just talking about some positive traits that A.J. Dillon has, there's always that one guy in the comment section going, oh, but Mason, Derrick Henry has better vision than A.J. Dillon. Yes, of course, Derrick Henry is better than A.J. Dillon in a million different ways. But what we can say is with that size, speed, adjusted athleticism, it would make a lot of sense that if the Green Bay Packers get inside the 5-yard line, that instead of having Aaron Jones there, they possibly put A.J. Dillon in the game. And what that would do if he can earn that goal line role is that would make A.J. Dillon a running back that even on weeks where you do have Aaron Jones completely healthy, possibly A.J. Dillon can be started in fantasy as well. I mean, just think way back with the New Orleans Saints in Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. You could start both running backs, and both running backs were hyper productive in fantasy. And if Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay this upcoming season, I think there's an upside for A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones to be that same type of combination, because we know that the Green Bay Packers are going to most likely have a top 5 offensive line in the NFL this upcoming year. So looking back at it, I mean, in yesterday's video, we were talking about my Hollywood Brown pick in the 9th round being so bad. And I think the main reason is we thought we were going to be able to get A.J. Dillon at the 10:07, given his high-stakes redraft ADP. Yet the people in this draft, I think, were a little too smart to let that happen. They take him at the 10:02, and that was a fantastic selection. So now let's get over to another wide receiver that I was hoping was going to fall to us. Let's go talk about Laviska Shenault. Okay, so if you pull up Laviska Shenault here, he actually went higher than where he's going in high-stakes redraft leagues as well. I mean, he went as the wide receiver 34. He goes before Courtland Sutton, and you're not going to see that in many fantasy drafts at all. He goes before Deebo Samuel, Robbie Anderson, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Waddle. He goes before Chase Edmonds and Justin Herbert. But I think this is the correct pick here with Laviska Shenault. I think this is a fantastic selection. And while taking him at the wide receiver 34 seems a little bit aggressive, I mean, I personally have Laviska Shenault as the wide receiver 26 in our rankings. And that's because you look at the prospect he was coming out of college, and this is a player that is the prototypical size that you want from the wide receiver position. And on top of that, I understand if you look at his combine numbers, he's not going to look that athletic. But no, he is a freak athlete. He was injured at the NFL Combine. That's why the numbers look a little bit skewed. And he was hyper productive at Colorado as well. This is a wide receiver that hits every single prospect profile box. And he's playing on an offense now that we have already dove into the numbers. We have already illustrated this when we talk about DJ Chark, when we talk about Laviska Shenault. I think that the storyline shouldn't be DJ Chark versus Laviska Shenault in terms of who you want in your fantasy drafts, because I think both of them are fantastic values right now. Like I said, Laviska Shenault, we currently have ranked as our wide receiver 26 this upcoming year. I think that's going to be higher than you see anywhere else. So while looking at him being drafted as the wide receiver 34 in this draft at the end of the 6th round does look aggressive, I think it's completely fine. This is a wide receiver that's going to be seeing possibly the largest quarterback upgrade in the entire NFL this upcoming season. Now, yes, you do have Travis Etienne coming in. Travis Etienne should take up a decent amount of targets, as well as Marvin Jones. But we have already shown how many targets are leaving this offense, where I think both Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark can be fantastic values in regular drafts this year, as well as dynasty drafts. So yeah, I am all over that Laviska Shenault price. And another draft pick that honestly kind of hurt me a little bit seeing was Joe Burrow. Okay, so Joe Burrow just making us look like complete idiots with our Kyler Murray pick at the 607. You know, in yesterday's video, I went through and I talked about why our Kyler Murray pick at the 607 was so bad. And that's because here, Joe Burrow goes at the very end of the 13th round. So Caleb decides to completely punt the quarterback position, something that I'm going to be honest, that was my plan coming into this draft. I thought we were going to be getting Joe Burrow in the 11th or the 12th round, and we had Kyler Murray fall to us in the middle of the 6th. We weren't planning on it, and I was going, okay, well, I guess at this point we have to take Kyler, and it was a massive, massive mistake because imagine you go through the first 12 rounds, you just hit, let's go through this team real quick. You go Kelsey, Akers, McLaurin, Montgomery, Javonte Williams, Devonta Smith, Rashad Bateman, Michael Carter, Paris Campbell, A.J. Dillon, Adam Troutman. You're drafting Adam Troutman before you've had your first quarterback, Mike Gesicki, and you get all those picks off the boards. You really just go in and hammer every single position where you feel comfortable. And you would imagine that you're going to be at a massive disadvantage at quarterback, that you're going to be put into a situation where you're having to stream the position, you're having to play matchups and be put in a very difficult spot. Well, no, that's not the case. Understanding that you can wait on quarterback this year. We have made this mistake over and over and over and over again in fantasy drafts this offseason. And it's because last year, the quarterbacks like a Kyler Murray, a Josh Allen, those guys that were going in the mid quarterback 1 tier, they were smashes. But I think we need to understand that the quarterback position's a little bit different this offseason. Last year, we were targeting the Kyler Murray. We were targeting the Josh Allen. But this year, you can wait a lot longer than where those players are being drafted. So congrats on actually pulling that strategy off. It was fantastic. I am very jealous that you were able to do that. And yeah, I mean, you have Joe Burrow going behind Malcolm Brown, Denzel Mims, Kadarius Toney. I drafted Rashad Penny over Joe Burrow. Just disgusting. Now, Justin Jefferson, going to be our next player. We're going to the complete opposite side of the spectrum here. We're going from the 13th round all the way up to the 3rd. And with Justin Jefferson, it's not like I consider myself significantly higher than consensus on him this upcoming year. I mean, obviously, we loved him last year, but this year I think his price is pretty much neutral with where we are going to have him in our rankings. I mean, right now in high-stakes redraft leagues, his ADP is the wide receiver 7, and in our own personal rankings, we have him as the wide receiver 8. But in this draft right here, Justin Jefferson actually almost slid to us in the 3rd round. So we ended up taking Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams at the 106, the 207, and then at the 305, Justin Jefferson was still available. I thought we were possibly going to be getting Justin Jefferson in the 3rd round. I mean, can you imagine getting Justin Jefferson at the 306? That would have been fantastic, but it's still great to get him here at the 305. M4 McKissius, don't know how to say that name, probably butchered it, but regardless, I mean, got a massive value with Justin Jefferson as the wide receiver 11. So essentially a low in wide receiver 1, high in wide receiver 2. He finished higher than that in points per game last year as a rookie. Now, Justin Jefferson, there's not much to say at this point. Just I want to highlight that value. And that's how you know drafts aren't going to go the same way every single time. I mean, in this draft, you had Allen Robinson, Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley, Michael Thomas, all going ahead of Justin Jefferson. And I mean, that's just not something you're going to see very often. Now, our last player we are going to be talking about is going to be at the tight end position. So our initial plan going into this draft was I was going, okay, we are going to wait until the very end on quarterback. We are going to wait until the very end on tight end. We are just going to hammer in wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, running back. And yes, we were able to wait on tight end, but someone who pulled this off perfectly was actually Watson. Okay, so if you look at Watson's draft right here, he waits until the 12th round to draft Logan Thomas. And what is so good about this is not only does he get that fantastic value with Logan Thomas, who is the tight end 4 in points per game last year, but at the same time, he identifies where the last tier actually is. And you go through, you look at the players that were drafted directly ahead of Logan Thomas. You have Alexander Madison, Darrell Henderson, Adam Troutman. I can't agree with Adam Troutman picked that, but it's regardless. Let's look over it slightly. Gabriel Davis, Devontae Parker, Latavius Murray, Cole Beasley. And a value like that is why I was saying in yesterday's video why I hated the Mark Andrews, I hated the TJ Hawkinson selections in the beginning of the 5th, because it looks like tight end is another position that you can completely punt this coming year, because we already did that research. We already illustrated that you are either going to be coming away with a Travis Kelce, a George Kittle, a Darren Waller, somebody that's in tier 1, and at that point they're going to have an incredible win rate, or you really want to be waiting until the very end. You really want to be waiting until the 12th round, like you actually had from Watsenberger, who actually won this spot into the $500 league for completely free. So yeah, that is a fantastic draft pick there, my man. We ended up getting Evan Ingram in the middle of the 15th, but I think that we would honestly probably prefer Logan Thomas at the 1201. Now, another selection I really want to highlight here is going to be Michael Gallup at the 809. Now, we have talked about Michael Gallup over and over and over again. And here with Gallup, I will say that I understand why some people are just pushing him down their board entirely. And that's obvious because he's the wide receiver 3 on his offense. Nobody's going to be making the argument to draft him over Amari Cooper or over CeeDee Lamb. And both wide receivers should out-target Michael Gallup this upcoming year. But not many people remember Michael Gallup was a high-end wide receiver 2 his second season in the NFL in 2019. He had more targets per game. He had more receiving yards per game than Amari Cooper. And I love Amari Cooper. We all know that. But understanding the talent of a Michael Gallup, understanding that the Dallas Cowboys could easily be one of the highest passing offenses in the entire NFL. He goes behind Tyler Boyd, and Tyler Boyd in a very similar situation, I would argue, a much worse wide receiver. And in the case of Gallup, this is a player that also, if you had an injury to either Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb, all of a sudden, you have that boosted target share. All of a sudden, he goes up to being the wide receiver 2 in the offense, led by Dak Prescott, and I think you have to be incredibly excited about that. But thank you, my dudes. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Of course, go down there, drop that like, and if you saw a pick that we did not cover in this draft right now, let me know your opinion in the comment section below. Don't just say a name. Please leave a small explanation behind it. And yeah, I hope I will see y'all with the video tomorrow. Thank you so much for everyone joining the flock in Will, Wesley, Ethan, Sabres, Jonah, Austin, Andrew, Doug, Brandon, and Adam. Thank you so much, my dudes.